What will the new national education policy mean for an Atmanirbhar India? We have three powerful voices in the Indian education sector discussing this. One of them is Dr. Anil Sahasrabudhe, the chairman of the AICTE. The next speaker is Dr. Shekhar C. Mande, the Director General of the CSIR. We also have Chamu Krishna Shastri, an educator who's been working for the revival of the Sanskrit language. He is a trustee and secretary of the Sanskrit Promotion Foundation. The trio will be in conversation with Daniel Timaya, chief reporter, The New Indian Express.
Gentlemen, as you're well aware, today the conversation that we wanted to have is to talk about three very intrinsic facets of the new education policy. One, of course, being research, the other, of course, being rankings, and the third, of course, being Indianization and bringing our ancient culture and great wisdom into our curriculum. And to kickstart this conversation, let me first ask Dr. Shekhar C. Mande. Dr. Mande, you've had a very, very busy year. In fact, you were one of the first people to caution when the numbers of COVID started going down, talk about a second wave and the need for caution. And of course, you've also talked about a third wave and about the need for constant research and for these innovations to keep rolling out. Do tell us, on one hand, we've had a really fascinating year, with innovations like the ventilator project in IIT Kanpur, so many things coming from IIT Guwahati, and from your very own labs, we've had some fast-tracked projects that have really proved that India has the wherewithal and the speed to be Atmanirbhar. Where do you see the research ecosystem in India right now after this year? And looking at the kind of provisions that the new education policy has brought in, where do you see us going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Basically, COVID year, if you can call it 2020, has been an enormous great teacher for all of us. I mean, not only researchers, not only academicians, but for the entire society, we have learned a great deal from this 1 year, how badly things can go if we're not careful. But thankfully, in India, things have been comparatively better compared to even the most advanced nations. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But in terms of research, it has taught us many different things. When we started running short of supplies for COVID mitigation, including, small things like PPEs, nasal swabs and all, it immediately highlighted the very fascinating aspect that we have to be self-independent. That we as a country, as what we would call should be Atmanirbhar in terms of everything that we make or whatever. Now that cannot be possible without actually we are globally competitive, and we have entire ecosystem that exists here. And therefore, that immediately brought in a concept what the Honorable Prime Minister calls as Atmanirbhar Bharat. And in terms of research, therefore, what we started about a year ago for COVID mitigation, many organizations, including the IIT Kanpur and all that you mentioned, and of course my own organization CSIR, our main strategy has been that we interact with the Indian industry very closely. That's number one. Number two, any technology that we develop must be developed so that every component of the technology is available in India. So that if the technology has to be deployed, it can be done very rapidly. And based on these two principles, it has brought both academia and industry together and has made aware that things can be made in India. Now, coming to the education policy, the new education policy or the National Education Policy 2020 also talks of these very critical issues. Innovations, research ecosystem, and a vibrant knowledge society, which actually inculcates creativity and critical thinking in order to encourage logical decision making and innovation. Now, this actually integrates entirely with what we have learned in the COVID. And therefore, there is a seamless integration between the education policy and what we have actually learned in terms of new technologies and things that we have developed in the COVID era. But I'm pretty sure there will also be very important views that we wait to hear from Anil Sahasrabudhe on this. Thank you.
Professor Sahasrabudhe, now, it's been a very strange year for engineering institutions. It's been a strange year for all institutions in India. It's not something that anybody would have imagined that they would see in their lifetimes, this kind of a zero year as people are calling it. You've not only managed to come up with policies very, very fast, you've come up with rules and regulations and ways to manage how institutions run during this year in conjunction with the government and several states and whatnot. looking ahead, do you think that the way that the NEP is going to be rolled out and implemented after such a difficult year, do you think that we are going to see any sort of delay in the speed at which it is rolled out?
Thank you, Daniel. Already Shekhar Mande has spoken many things about what we have been able to do, especially on the innovation front or research front. In terms of what we didn't have, we started doing it. Within a matter of few months. As far as education is concerned, very few institutions had an online teaching learning methodology adopted, and we all graduated from nothing to fully online education, which has become order of the day. We already had what is known as Swayam platform, which is a massive online open course indigenous platform where 3,000 courses are there from all fields, right from engineering, science, medicine, law, arts, crafts, design, music, everything. But however, the UGC AICTE allowed 20% of the credits to be taken through this medium. Very few takers were there. But now today we have a huge number of students as well as faculty doing those courses, and they are getting accredited into their program. So I think there is a big ticket change. So even after the crisis is over and then we come out and the physical classes start, this learning which we have been able to do probably will continue in the form of blended learning, and that is the philosophy which is also adopted in the new education policy. We talk about use of technology in education. This is nothing but use of technology, and which will empower students who do not have access to a particular subject teacher in his own college or university can take a course from the best in the class from within the country. I think that is a real empowerment for students, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities. I think that is going to catapult us into real knowledge society. Secondly, there is a huge scope for multidisciplinary nature of education, which the policy talks about. Students of engineering can take music, maybe a student of physics can take painting. So that opportunity is going to be created through this policy. And also exit and entry at any level because of either difficulty in the family, or you have not been really be interested, but you are thrust by your parents or some peer pressure. You want to move out and do something else. All of those things which were actually closed so far, all of these doors have been opened up by the new national education policy. The last but not the least, which Dr. Shekhar Mande said is very, very significant and important, is about becoming Atmanirbhar. How is it possible? In terms of the requirements for COVID itself, the crisis was taken care of by individual institutions, even in small place. IIT Kanpur might have developed a kit, or IIT Delhi developed a kit for testing itself, to the ventilators, to you have all types of masks which came from different organizations at very, very small cost and from very, very small places. That means we have this capability, which we had tested ground for the last 4 years in terms of Smart India Hackathon, that tier 2, tier 3 city students, in fact, they outnumber in terms of quality and quantity vis-a-vis IITs. All the prize winners, we have found that they are from tier 2, tier 3 cities. Probably they never got opportunity. They would have also been having that aspiration to get into IIT, but they don't. But they have that passion, and that passion was visible in the Smart India Hackathons which we held in the last 4 years. And that is why, whether it is now Drug Discovery Hackathon going on, Samadhan, even challenges of the COVID itself were also in terms of hackathon we did conduct. This is one aspect. The second aspect is research. Innovation and research, they have to go hand in hand. And in the new education policy, there is National Research Foundation, which will give a big ticket funding, which is required for high level of research, which is going to be now substantially possible, which was difficult earlier because of the amount of funding. The Honorable Finance Minister has announced this year itself 10,000 crore, and in the next 5 years 50,000 crore rupees is earmarked for research. And already in terms of other aspects, you also talked about the Indian knowledge systems that the policy talks about. I would like to allow Dr. Krishna Shastri, who has been not only a Sanskrit scholar but a man who has been driving this mission, that ancient India had so much of knowledge resources, and we have somehow not been very proud of that and not continuing with that. how that knowledge can be made relevant to today's societal needs and beyond. We are talking about 21st century. Probably why 21st century? Even the entire millennium later, has to be based on the traditional knowledge which we had acquired, how it can be made relevant, how the research can be taken forward. So whether it is our own ranking system, National Institutional Ranking Framework, we have an ARIA ranking, Atal ranking for innovation achievements by the institutions. All of this, when we combine them together, there will be a different kind of an ambience created in academic institutions and research institutions, which will certainly make us Atmanirbhar. I think I will stop here, and then when second opportunity comes, I will speak about other issues.
Thank you, Professor Sahasrabudhe. Shastri ji, would you like to tell us what your thoughts are primarily on the NEP now? When you saw the document, I'm sure there would have been a lot of things that gave you cheer, that would have made you very glad that, finally someone was focusing on Indian culture, Indian values, bringing back Indian knowledge systems into the mainstream curriculum. Perhaps you could tell us what you think you particularly liked about the policy and how realistic you think this will be in the next few years to come.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. First, at the outset, I would like to say two sentences about Atmanirbhara Bharatam. You see, Atmanirbhara Bharatam has two meanings. One is that, as all know, self-reliant India. But there is another philosophical meaning which is very much relevant even for our today's discussion as well. See, India, that is Bharat. That is one meaning that gives the connotation of a country or a nation. But the very word Bharatam has a great meaning. Bha, Bharatam is a Sanskrit word. Bha means light, that is knowledge. Bha is knowledge. Ratam means immersed. A person or a community or a nation immersed in knowledge is called Bharatam. The very word Bharatam explains what our country is, what our civilization is. So therefore, Atmanirbhara Bharatam, the one meaning of Atma is Atmanirbhara, self-reliant. But Atma has got a spiritual meaning also. I do not go in detail to that because the Bharatam was a spiritual Bharatam. The ancient Indian education system was also integrated with the spirituality. Even Raja Ramanna and many others have said science without spirituality is blind, and spirituality without science is lame. So Atmanirbhara Bharatam has to have both of these, then only. And even the education policy the very second paragraph of the education policy speaks about that. Just I would read out just 3 sentences of that second paragraph from: the rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought has been a guiding light for this policy. The pursuit of knowledge, jnana, wisdom, prajna, and truth, satya, was always considered in Indian thought and philosophy as the highest human goal. The aim of education in ancient India was not just the acquisition of knowledge as preparation for life in this world or life beyond schooling, but for the complete realization and liberation of the self. This speaks about this NEP. This is the change and change maker. So, from the very beginning of the policy till the end, it has a focus of creating a new Atmanirbhara Bharatam. So this is point number 1. Point number 2, you see, there is a great emphasis for Indian languages in this education policy. For the first time, there is a focus shift from English to Indian languages, Bharatiya Bhasha. That is the issue here. And for the Atmanirbhara Bharatam, for the Swabhimana Jagaranam and awareness, and to connect our people, our students, our youth with the roots. Language has a great role to play because most of the words are non-translatable to English. So, but all Bharatiya Bhashas have the same vocabulary, but they cannot be translated to English. That was the because of that non-translatable words were translated to English, and that made a great damage. So this education policy shift to Indian languages will make the change. Point number 3, there is an difference in approach for the education. That is, the approach adopted here is integral and multidisciplinary approach. Even for arts subjects, commerce subjects, science subject, technology, STEM student, everyone has to study either as an optional language with either Indian languages, one more language, or liberal arts, science, philosophy, dance, music, art, culture, anything. So this will make the our youth to understand our civilizational concerns, civilization, our values, and they will understand this land better. They will understand Bharat. So this is one. Another point is that introduction of Indian knowledge system, and that has been made mandatory to be introduced as part of the curriculum from school level to higher education, and it will be introduced not as a separate subject, but every subject of modern stream will be included with its Indian ancient Indian knowledge for every class, every stage. So it will be integrated. Our ancient Indian knowledge system will be integrated with every modern subject as well. So this is another important factor. And the other important factor is the importance given to Sanskrit language as well. And also the first time in the policy, Sanskrit knowledge system, this word is also used. So Sanskrit language also will make, because language, Sanskrit has been the vehicle of our knowledge, tradition of this country, this land. So importance to Sanskrit will also make difference. And also the ODL, online distant learning mode, will make a great difference, because experts are not available in every place, and the ODL will make every branch of knowledge accessible to every student.
That's something that is very imminent, especially after the last year. As Professor Sahasrabudhe pointed out, online learning has become the norm. But let me just come back quickly to Dr. Mande. Dr. Mande, now it's been a very bittersweet year, as we mentioned, for researchers in India. On one hand, we've had a lot of them have access and have very quick pipelines to supply, and like you said, great innovation has come under great duress, and this is something that we have to be very proud of. And I think the researchers and at the CSIR, the kind of response, especially with the vaccines and the creation of these quick pipelines, has been something that is very heartening, and it's a great success story that we'll talk about for many years. On the other hand, you have a small set of researchers, of course, talking about how they have not been getting stipends, and of course CSIR has been instrumental in getting the deadline extended by 6 months and another 6 months. So as somebody who is at the grassroots, Dr. Mande, what is the morale and what is the scene among India's research public right now?
As I said, even in my earlier comments, the COVID era has really been an awakening period for Indian researchers, because to some extent, actually touched the chord somewhere, so that all of us have to work together for a common cause. In this case, to beat this particular virus. We have always had a great tradition of science and technology. Even the modern science and technology, we have always been supported extraordinarily well by the society. Organizations like CSIR started in pre-independent era, and throughout we have enjoyed a great political support, irrespective of whichever political establishment has come in power. So that actually has been a very, very heartening thing for the Indian science and technology community. But I would like to second what both the other panelists said about our rich tradition. When we speak of the evolving traditions of science and technology in India, has been extraordinarily rich. We can go a few thousand years ago and recall, for example, discussions between Rishi Yagyavalkya and Gargi and Maitri on other side, and asking some of the most profound questions about nature. And that tradition has continued through, till about 18th century, that tradition continued very well. Our mathematics, our astronomy, our metallurgy, all of it, actually our medicine, all of it evolved extraordinarily well. There is a period, of course, where we were made to believe, rather, that most of the knowledge has only arrived in some parts of the world and not in India. But now, thanks to the national education policy, that hopefully will actually reverse the trend and also imbibe the feeling amongst people that the knowledge and the curiosity among people, which eventually leads to science and technology or advancing the frontiers of knowledge, that actually would be an enabling factor in this new policy. So in a sense, the entire science and technology community in India has found some sort of a goal to work with at the COVID times for a purpose, that was sense of purpose that has been defined. And on the other hand, the National Education Policy 2020 gives a vehicle to follow the path in front so that we can be proud of what we do here for the overall development of the society. That's actually what I would like to put it that way.
And Dr. Mande, because you meet a lot of researchers and you're constantly in touch with people, and people are constantly coming up with they're coming up with new innovations, but they always talk about time as being a crucial factor during this corona year, and everybody's sort of breathing down the neck of CSIR, waiting for approvals, for guidelines. Has that sort of put pressure on you as a person and CSIR as a body this year? It might not have been easy to sort of either nod for everything or say no, because there's always the risk of criticism on one hand and praise on the other. How has that been for you?
So you see, what has happened is, what has helped at least CSIR, I cannot talk of other organizations outside CSIR about this, is that we have had very strong relationship with industry. And what we realized is that that actually acted as a big buffer for us. And working closely with industry, many of the challenges, for example, that of funding, because the whole world went through an economic crisis, and science and technology organizations around the world were hit by this particular economic crisis. Naturally, anywhere in all the countries around the world, the science and technology budget was reduced, and we were not isolated in that particular sense, and rightly so. But working with industry actually helped us, because we did not actually, the shortfall in funding was not felt to the extent because of the public funding was getting less, but the private funding actually filled in for that particular reason. As you said about challenges has been, of course, things like what you mentioned in the example, paying the fellowships of the students in time and all. And we are continuously working towards that to make things better and better, so that we can actually make things more simpler for future.
Professor Sahasrabudhe, one of the things that most recently that you actually very succinctly stated, that the decision to expand the pool of subjects for getting into an engineering course, not necessarily having to do mathematics and physics, and in fact expand that pool to more students so that they could have different electives and get into engineering streams, was in fact something that the NEP has been talking about at its very intrinsic best. However, people have been sort of saying all kinds of things. There's been analysis this way and that way, but you've been very clear that this is a direction that the NEP is setting down, and this is a good thing. What was the rationale behind that, and where do you see that move impacting students, say 5-10 years down the line, now that more students can get into engineering, irrespective of what group they choose in, say, +1 and +2?
First of all, Mr. Daniel, there is a lot of misgiving which has been created by some of the media houses, as though mathematics and physics, or even for that matter chemistry and biology to a lesser extent, is not at all required to study engineering. This is absolutely a misconception created. what we stated is we have opened up the window for those who have not taken probably one of those subjects, because they are in such remote locations where there is not even a science college. The 11th and 12th in a small town or village may be only in arts or commerce, or there may be science existing but there is no chemistry teacher, so chemistry is not taken by someone. Such students should not be left out was the issue which we had handled in this particular thing. And today in the open schooling, even though your board examination may be from a state board or a CBSE board, you have lots of courses today available on the internet, on this Swayam platform, and also on YouTube, where one can actually learn on their own some subject which they have not learned. As I said, the use of technology. And such students, if they are capable of even writing that same joint entrance exam which IITs conduct, and he gets better score than even those who have done 11th, 12th in science, why are we subjecting him that in your 11th and 12th grade, the subject name physics or chemistry is not written and therefore you are not eligible? I think that was the perspective with which we have opened it up. But there are always confusions, and we have also said if someone has missed out something, they must do it in their very first year when they join, and then only they will be able to understand the future higher level of mathematics and physics courses, which are also mandatory in the model curriculum, plus engineering courses which they have to undertake. I think this is the number one point which we must understand. Otherwise, we will always go on rotating that how is that an engineer can be made from out of studying only history or philosophy. People raise such alarm. It is not going to be so. This is very, very clear. So, in fact, we are also developing probably a course of physics, chemistry, math, which is of equivalent of 11th and 12th grade, which can be offered independent of the school education on the MOOCs platform, Swayam, and students can take it, and thereby they are well prepared before even joining the stream. I think this is a very, very important thing which we have to do. Second aspect is we also talked about language. Others have also spoken about how Indian languages are given importance in the new national education policy, and that is where again we have to relate both these issues. If a student has done 10th, 11th, 12th in the mother tongue in some remote place, we should not close access, and that's why even engineering education and probably later medical education would be available in the mother tongue. This is very, very important. We are focusing that the primary education, higher education, both may be, right now we cannot say that it is mandatory for giving it, but at least open up the window. And when we open it up, naturally you require textbooks, reference books, material to study beyond the classroom, and teachers training, how do they handle such classes. So all of that within a short span of last 5-6 months since the policy is announced, AICT has been consistently working, and we have already got 900 odd people who are ready to write books in mother tongue, in different Indian languages. And we have also this Swayam course, which is already available in English, IITs. We are going to translate, and the translation tool is developed in-house. We didn't know that this is going to come. We didn't know about pandemic. This work was in progress a little earlier, and this was accelerated by us. And then today we have an automated tool. I think we should be proud. Nowhere in the world you have a course which is in English, which is delivered in English, that content is transcribed in English, and after vetting the transcription is correct, if you give that file, which is a Word file in English, it can be converted into 8 languages, including formulae, including the figures that are there on the on one panel. One pan can be English. Right hand side would be a version which may be in Tamil, which will be in Marathi, which will be in Hindi, which will be in Telugu, which will be in Kannada, which will be in Malayalam, which will be in Gujarati, which will be in Bengali. So far, we have got 8 languages. 3 other languages we have to work. They are Punjabi, Odia, and Assamese. Right now they are not there. We want to extend to these 3 languages, which are also major states. If you do that, you have material available for studying in the mother tongue. Now I am linking all 3. See, one is entry level. If you have not done something, you are in a position to come in. If you have done in your mother tongue and you want to continue to study in mother tongue, that access is being provided. And then, because all of this is having connectivity with what Krishna Shastri ji said, that Bharatam, so that pride feeling that we are part of us and we are valued. It's not just, many times people get confused that some language is being thrust on someone. It is all Indian languages are so rich. We respect each one of them is the spirit which is being imbibed through this particular action that we are taking. And therefore, on one side, Indian knowledge system, Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, the ancient science, how it can be made relevant, how research can be continued in that domain is one aspect. How people from different backgrounds come in. I think when you have different types of background, diversity in the domain of education, there will be a lot of innovations happen, and all research and innovation and new products and processes are always on intersections of different disciplines. A student who has done some course of a different nature will bring in a bigger and different value to the proposition of education in the engineering education. So that is also being served. And the translation tool will really empower students in terms of learning in the mother tongue. I think I'm connecting all the three dots which are there in the new policy, along with what I said, multiple exit, multiple entry, and all of that which is spoken in some way or the other is getting integrated, and teachers are being trained in that all processes. Thank you.
I think that's the crucial link, getting teachers trained in the process, because without teachers, I don't think any of this can go forward. Shastri ji, you mentioned, of course, that Indian knowledge systems are being worked upon in a very effervescent manner, and they're going to be integrated into the school curriculum, into all levels of the curriculum, to ensure that students have knowledge about ancient Indian science, ancient Indian traditions, culture, and so on. First and foremost, from the perspective of the committee and as somebody who is an expert in Indian knowledge systems, what are the things that you think need to be done immediately in the next few years to ensure that Indian knowledge systems are sort of brought in at a school level, so that when they reach a higher level, it, like Professor Sahasrabudhe said, invokes a sense of pride in our young students?
Thanks to Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe because of his initiative and efforts now, and also because of the passion for Indian knowledge system, passion of education minister. Now, IKS cell has been created in the IKS division in education ministry, which is housed in AICT headquarters, and principal scientific advisor to PM, Professor Raghavan, is also member of that committee, and the committee has started working. About 1,000 researchers have already associated with this cell, and several verticals are identified, like environment, social science, science and technology, like that. And institutions and individuals who are interested to do research on IKS have been being coordinated in the work, and collecting the material available in the public domain, that is being done, and also projects are being worked out, and also people are asked to integrate this IKS with the school curriculum. So people are working in various states, also working with the state boards. Then there will be several types of research: text-based research, then subject-based research. Then also knowledge is available in all Indian languages, even traditional knowledge, and all types of knowledge has to be presented in a evaluated, validated. Such material has to be published in a portal. A portal is being developed to make the knowledge available to all the people, and people from world over are interested to participate in this project. That is very much interesting. And also, subject wise, you take any branch of modern stream, you will get related material in ancient literature of all Indian languages. Such material are being now validated. One Center of Excellence for Indian Knowledge System is set up in Kharagpur IIT. Another Center of Excellence is being developed in Delhi IIT. And recently, just a week back, so many institutions, private universities and NGOs are highly interested to take up this IKS research, and workshops, seminars, lectures are being arranged all over the country. Now, IKS is a highly discussed, studied, researched subject, and thousands of people are writing research papers on IKS. That is what I would like to say. And the time has come for the rejuvenation of Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, and creating a Navabharata Nirmanam on the basis of our Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. The Nava Yuga has started.
Thank you, Shastridi. That's very optimistic and something that everybody is looking forward to as well. Dr. Mande, might I just very quickly ask you this? This is a very difficult question that I'm sure you get asked all the time. You, of course, have been watching the COVID curve very, very carefully in conjunction with how the trials have been going for the vaccines, and as the vaccines have been rolled out and now they've reached almost every corner of the country. Even developed countries have called it immensely impressive the way India has rolled out the vaccine and continues to do so. However, because of the second wave that we're now sort of experiencing in pockets of the country, institutions are sort of scaling back, they're closing doors. We're hearing reports from all over the country. Tamil Nadu is a little badly hit. Maharashtra, Bhubaneswar, of course, is reeling slightly. Looking at the graph and looking at the way the numbers are going, what do you foresee for the next few months or so as far as educational institutions are concerned?
So, quite rightly pointed out, the pandemic is not over. And like all pandemics, it will keep coming in waves. And the waves come in principally for 2 or 3 different reasons. One of the reasons is, of course, we become complacent when the numbers go down and we think that it's over. And that complacency actually is bad for the pandemic. So it comes back again, it hits back. The second reason, of course, is that there are mutations in the viruses that occur, which is a natural process, and that happens. And the third and most, of course, is we forget that in the pathogens like this, it spreads faster if people are in closed rooms and in non-ventilated areas and things like that. Now, having learned this thing very early on in the pandemic last year, it was natural that we went into a lockdown first, and then all the schools and colleges were actually asked to be closed down, or rather switch to online mode of teaching, what Anil Sasabudhe mentioned.
And India is one of the countries that actually did it very early, as you pointed out.
Correct. And even today, when it is so good to see that many of the exams and all in universities and all are actually being conducted online. And thanks to organizations like AICTE and all, who have actually worked and have made this possible. You know, I mean, teaching the entire year online and having conducted exams online and all has been a real good achievement. Now, in the coming year, it's very difficult to predict unless we are confident that pandemic has gone away and it's not going to come back. I think we should be very, very careful in opening up schools, colleges, and so on and so forth. So at least the classroom teaching, we should be extraordinarily careful to open up unless we are very confident. And that confidence can be gained by multiple things. For example, we must ensure that people are vaccinated appropriately, all the school students and college students and all, so that we are confident that they will not catch the infection. We must make sure that people do follow, the students do follow COVID appropriate behavior, that even in classrooms and all, they maintain distance from each other. They wear masks continuously. And if all of this is done, it might be possible to open up schools and colleges in a very measured manner in the coming time. But let us all not forget that pandemic is not over, and let us all be extremely careful about how we behave outside our houses.
Thank you, Professor Mande. Historically speaking, every pandemic that the world has faced over the last few centuries, though the time span has sort of come down with each of the diseases, whether it is Spanish flu and any of the other pandemics that we've faced, it has been shown that it does go on for a good, 2 to 3 years, if not 5 years. Do you see the same progression sort of repeating itself this time?
So at the moment, it's very difficult to predict how it is going to pan out because we cannot actually say how soon we will get herd immunity. We are not getting close there anywhere. Whether the mutants which arise, are they weaker and weaker, or it is going to become endemic, as happens in many cases. Many of the diseases actually after the pandemic slowly over a period of time become endemic and become seasonal and become much less deadly than this one. So at this moment, it's difficult to predict in which direction we are heading.
Professor Sahasrabuddhe, your last word. Looking forward, the next few years are very exciting because we have a new national education policy coming in. AICTE, of course, has rolled out a whole host of online programs that are really sort of taking the game up and changing things. You're giving competition to some of the private players. In fact, the numbers that you've given us are very impressive, especially with the new internship program. What are some of the things that you're really looking forward to that will change the game, make India Atmanirbhar?
So I think the pandemic has given us, along with that challenge, a great opportunity, which we have started exploring, exploiting, whatever you say. As in terms of even regulation, the new policy talks about regulation being light but tight. Many people ask this question to me: what is this light and tight? Like in company law, what we want to do is every institution honestly should display what all they have, and then whatever requirements are there from the regulatory body should satisfy. That's all. And if you say that we do satisfy, we should believe in them. The important part was trust was not there earlier, between regulator and the operators at the ground level. Once the trust is developed, 99% of the institutions will follow suit, and then they will declare what they do have, and students will take a choice which is absolutely according to what they expected. Whereas there will be still 1 or 2% of those institutions who would be probably giving fake information, and that is where the regulatory body has the job that when complaints come, we will have to do action. And that action today need not be even by visiting the campuses, because there are lots of corruption charges when experts go and visit. They demand something is the kind of thing when many times we hear. So now the pandemic allowed us to conduct the entire inspection in an online mode using Microsoft Teams, and faculty sitting in 3 different places actually virtually visit the campus, nooks and corners, including noting the GPS coordinates of the campus, so that there is no cheating absolutely possible, and no one can deny the recorded video lecture that is available with us. So therefore, there is absolutely, what I say, transparent, non-corrupt system which has automatically evolved thanks to COVID. So this is as far as the regulation is concerned. But as far as teaching learning is concerned, I'm sure we all are aware, we are already graduated into that, and no 0 year, probably the only country which started immediately after the pandemic, and we have been delayed by a couple of months, no doubt. We can make it up in about a year or year and a half, the academic session which has got delayed. But many countries have a 0 year. They are losing 1 year. We have not lost a single year. I think this is very phenomenal. Therefore, even after the pandemic is over and we are able to go to the physical classes, which is also important because human to human interaction is important. Playing games on the playground is important. Doing drama, music, dance on the stage is important. And therefore, when we go back to the old days, still the lessons learned will be useful in terms of learning new things from different places, different sources. And that is where I said blended learning will become the order of the day. And maybe sometimes internships may be online, sometimes it could be in a face-to-face mode. So we are trying to involve in all possible ways, wherever possible, use technology. And this technology will be a level playing field being created amongst all citizens. Many times people talk about digital divide. I don't think there will be any digital divide for 2 reasons. One is we have been constantly increasing the reach in terms of fiber connectivity to nooks and corners of the country. Like electricity is there now available in all the villages. All villages are nearly connected with the broadband internet connectivity, maybe private operators, maybe government. That is first part. As far as devices are concerned, we will take a little longer. People can donate devices. Many IT companies who change their computers and laptops every 5 years, 4 years, the devices which have been surrendered by them can be used by children who cannot afford to have the devices. people who have smartphones, at least 7, 8 of them lying in their homes, can be donated to the college library or a school library, and the poor children who cannot afford, the functional phones can be used. And therefore, one side device, the other side connectivity. If these are two taken care of, education will be accessible. We talk about equity, access, and to the nooks and corners, and really 50% of the GR which we are envisaging in the next 10-15 years is a reality which is possible.
Truly, it's an age of opportunity in the land of opportunity. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Dr. Mande. Thank you, Professor Sahasrabudhe, and thank you, Mr. Shastri. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you. Please stay safe.